Hello. Hi, Marco time. Is it macro time? Hey Abdul and John and Andre, how you guys doing? Um I This is the topic that I probably should know better than tackling because it involves so much. I don't want to say controversy, uh, but sort of like it's almost an impossible kind of problem to solve, sort of like the Gordian knot. And so that's what we're going to take that on today. By the way, guys, hi Mark and Mr. Gumby, Graham, how you guys doing? How was the video and the sound okay? I always like to check that because I could be going like this and no one can hear me or talking and no one can see. Everything okay? Hi, Junior. Um, Hi, Tuna. Anyway, so uh, it, let me ask you first of all. Oh, good. Thanks, Mark. Let me ask you first of all. Is there or is anyone not familiar with the Grand Prix d'Horlogerie de Genève? Let me ask that first of all. In a nutshell, it's sort of like the Academy Awards for watches. Very similar in terms of how important it is to people who are in the watchmaking field. But if there's anybody who's not familiar with it, I'll be glad to elaborate. Hi, Hader, Thomas, Abdul. How you guys doing? Um, okay. On the little announcement that I sent out, I had all of the categories, and let me go over them and sort of talk about them and get some feedback from you. Uh, for about the last I don't know how many years that I've been collecting, I've always kept a close eye on the Grand Prix d'Horlogerie de Genève for this reason. When I first started collecting watches, um, like everybody else, there were all kinds of people said, "Oh, this is the best watch. This is the best watch. Oh, you really ought to get this one." And so I started looking at Grand Prix winners, and I was told by people, "Oh, you shouldn't listen to them." And I thought, well, why not? You know, here you've got experts from all aspects of the watchmaking and mechanical watchmaking, and why would they know less than a bunch of rough and tumble guys like we are? So that's why I listened to him. Then I met a judge who uh, wasn't too far from here. We became friends. Was a Grand Prix judge, and I got a lot of insights from him. He said, by and large, it's pretty straight. He said there are a few little things there that can be, I guess, an undue influence. And he was a great booster of the German watches. He was German, but still, though, he had a lot of respect for it. And if you look at all of the awards that All Longa won, they can be a lot of German watches can win. So, okay, so let's take a look at these categories and try to figure out if they make sense or not. Now, the first two are the ladies and complications. The ladies' watch, I don't know if they still if in the ladies' watch, I think they may still allowed quartz. I'm not positive though. They did at one time, but then in the ladies' complications, they didn't. And to me, that made sense. So I really there's not a lot I could say about that. I'm very familiar with some of the companies working with a watch company that made women's watches, and they had some complications and some other features to it that were as good, if not better, than a lot of men's. So, but that's another story. So I'm going to sort of pass on that. Now, the next two I want to talk about are men's and men's complications. Um, winning the men's category, I think, is a big deal, but I think it's almost suicidal to enter a watch in the men's contest, in the men's category, because one, there are a lot of other watch companies that do it, and two, they're very good. And in 2007, this one I thought I'd wear one of my winning watches. This was the men's watch in 2007. I won. This is a FP Journe Chronomètre Souverain, and it really it's a great watch. But there are a lot of other great watches, and so this is a tough category. And if any watch that's won the men's category, I have a lot of respect for it because it's tough competition. Men's complications. Now this is it can be any number of types of complications. It was at one time nothing but tourbillons, but then they set up a excuse me, they set up a tourbillon category. So if you had a tourbillon, rather than a men's complication, you put it in tourbillon category. So the men's complications that they would have things like remontoir d'égalité or some other feature that was a complication, or they would add some action to it. This did not include chronographs. Or chronographs is in a separate category, but any other kind of complication, they would do that. Now, this didn't include things like calendars or astronomy, because that's another category. And so men's complications were simply, I think, just sort of base, good mechanical chronometer kinds of elements to it. Hi, Orange Hand. How you doing? And Homer. Hi, Homer. How you guys doing? Anyway, so these are some of the things. Now, to me, men's and men's complications, you just have to have a super good watch to enter into those. Girard-Perregaux, they have some that they put in there. FP Journe has this one won. Voutilanen has won. He's entered. Anyway, some of the real tip-top watchmakers. I think at one time, perhaps Patek Philippe and Vacheron Constantin and Audemars Piguet. Audemars Piguet, I think, has probably won more than any other watch company in the Grand Prix. They've won a lot of them. So this was like that's going into really tough competition. Now the next one is called iconic, and I call it we ran out of ideas category. I have no idea why they have iconic. Iconic is, for example, the Tag Heuer Monaco would be an iconic watch. There are a lot of iconic watches, I guess, that Breguet Classique, for example, there are a lot of different ones that they have. But what does that mean? I mean, why is that a competitive category? And it's a really funny category. I'm not sure why they put it in. I can cynically guess why, and so I'll sort of let that one go. Hi, J-Man. How are you? Yeah, delete iconic. I'm with you, J-Man. I think so too. I mean, like, it's sort of like, well, at some point, people are saying, well, they won the iconic. It's sort of like it's almost like a participation prize that they give kids whose parents worry too much about their self-esteem. Like, oh boy, you got a whole wall of participation prizes. That might hurt somebody's self-esteem too, but there it is. The tourbillon category is pretty self-explanatory. You got a tourbillon on your watch, and it's something that you have. Okay. The calendar and astronomy. This category is pretty self-explanatory. It's sort of an interesting one. I think they put them together because a lot of times with calendar, and then you have a moon phase, which is a type of calendar. Then you have perpetual calendars, and then you have all of these, certain fancy astronomical kinds of things, and that's pretty makes sense. Now, another one is called mechanical exception. Um, Here you have men's complication and women's complication, and then you have another one called mechanical exception. I'm not sure why they have those. Now, what they may be thinking is like, well, these are the best watches. I would agree with that too, by the way. And we got a category for tourbillons. We have one for chronographs. And so what if we have mechanical exceptions along with both ladies' complications and men's complications? That's sort of a one that is a little head scratcher, but not too much. Um, Chronograph, we talked about that. That's pretty easy. You got a chronograph, you think it's good, you enter it. I think the chronograph that was made by Agenor, it has won in that category more than once. In other words, like I think Singer had it in one of their watches and they won. And then H. Moser put it in their watch and changed it and they won. And, it's, this is incredible chronograph. It would be, and what are the other ones? Well, the old El Primero, I have one of those and I love it, but that's another story. And what is it, 7750, the ETA 7750 seemed to have a chronograph. There are probably a few more that I can't think of, but that thing, the one that Agenor has called the Agengraph, just crushes the competition. So I don't know if they're going to allow them in. Now, this next one is called the divers. Now, I suppose there's nothing wrong with having a divers, but they used to have a category called sports watches, and in sports watches you could have a pilot's watch as a sort of pilot sports, motor sports, and divers. As sort of underwater sports, but they got rid of those and just have divers. Why? I don't know. That's one I think they ought to sort of try to figure that one out. Now, another thing about these, I've seen during when they have the official announcement of all the competing watches, I'm getting better and better at seeing watches I know that aren't going to have a chance in a category. And in part, if you have something like it's a $200,000 Girard-Perregaux watch, and then you got I don't know, let's say in men's complications, then you have one by some guy or some smaller company or some company that people like, but they really don't have that. I know they're going to get crushed. A couple of years ago, I was able to predict every single one that would get into the nominations. Last year, I didn't do so hot. I missed a couple, but is that the more you pay attention to these competitions, the more you can predict things. And here's, I suppose, what I'm trying to say is that if you sort of have David and Goliath in some of these categories, and David doesn't have a slingshot, doesn't have much of a chance, and it's a very difficult kind of thing. I think where you have a big company versus some guys with a smaller company or a more specialized company. And also your independence. And by independence, I'm not talking about like Rolex, which is a big, big independent. By the way, too, Rolex is sort of interesting because they've never won an award. They didn't even get the nominations. In 2007, they entered two really nice watches. I liked them both. And they did something that I thought was not too wise. They put them both in the same category. Not only did they not win, but they didn't even make it to nominations. And I think The reason was that when you look at the other watches, if you really, if you really start looking at these watches, it's not always the most expensive or the most well known that wins. Some of these are simply done very well, and one of my favorite watches to watch win a lot is Harboring 2. I think they've won a total of 4 Grand Prix awards, which is, four more than Rolex, if you want to stop and think about it. What Rolex has done, it seems, is that they throw Tudor into some of the lower ones, and they seem to win a lot. Hater, okay, I think the mechanical exception category is a bit about things you normally wouldn't see in a wristwatch, like automation music boxes. Yeah, you can have that in there too. They would work. The thing, I suppose, and Hater, I think these are the ones to keep an eye out for. And I think they're very good ones. Divers can only go so far. God. No, Graham, that is not forgivable. Oh man. Okay. All sports watches should be considered. Yeah, I think, here's the funny thing. I think you have there was one year when they had, I think it was sports watches, and there was a one by a company called Eberhard, and they had something called the somethingograph, uh, snorkelgraph or something like that. Sort of a funny name, and they were like about listing at about a couple $1,000, and they were up against watches that were in 100,000. I mean, they really had. I mean, I thought, man, those guys don't have a chance. Well, they won. And it happened, the guy who announced the winning of it was, I guess, the chairman of the committee on those watches making their decision. And I talked to him about it. He's a guy that I knew. And I said, what, how did that happen? He said, these other guys, for a ton of money more, they didn't have any more in terms of the functionality of it. I thought, oh, okay, that sounded right. He was not invited back, by the way, the next year. I thought, you got to be careful about that. But these are some of the kinds of funny things. Sometimes the judges will work them out for themselves. Other times they won't. And this is why it's really like a horse race on that. By the way, too, every year I have a competition myself called the Grand Prix Picks, and we have 3 prizes, which are watches, and I've been collecting watches so I can give away at that. So once I have the announcement of the competing watches, I'll have more about it, and you guys can see if you can win a watch. It's sort of a fun thing. Like I said, it's something I've been doing for a number of years now, and it's a lot of fun. Hi, Beauty of Sin. How you doing? Okay, let's see what else you got going. Hater, I think, yep, mechanical. I think you're right about that. There are a couple of patterns that can be seen from the sections, like Tudor winning every year an award. Yes. Tudor, though, is somewhat of an artful dodger. Let me explain why. They'll have essentially the same watch with a new paint job. That's sort of a oversimplification, but that's what it comes down to. And one year it'll be in the divers, and then the next year it'll be in the challenge category, and then the petite aiguille category. And they seem to bounce around and figure out how to gather up prizes. But you're right, they have won a lot, and a lot of people are grumbling about it. But I have looked at those categories, and when you consider what was in the particular competing Tudor versus the competition, they should have won. And I think that people sort of, they immediately say, well, they're owned by Rolex. And Rolex, by the way, even though they've never won and they quit entering the contest after 2007, they still support it. And I think it's a great thing that they're doing. Okay, what do you got here? Hi, Untimely. How you doing? Hey, Flippin' Zippo. Fresh coat of paint can go a long way. Flippin' Zippo, yeah, it seems to have done that. Hey, oh, by the way, too, this is not a panning of Tudor. Tudor is figured out how things work and have been putting watches where they work the best. Some of these other ones, I don't know. I mean, they figure out how to. I mean, get an ETA movement, put it in a watch, and make it look weird or different or something like that, and they not win, and they start screaming that the the thing is rigged, which it's not. Or have sometimes I think, like I said, Tudor is got a very artful dodger in this whole thing, and I don't begrudge them one bit. I do think though that they have they simply know how the game is played. I'll put it that way. Okay, here you go. Okay, J Man. Yeah. Okay, let's see who else we got here. Let's see some bright ideas. Um, what do I think of the Doxa brand? Doxa has never won, Mark. I've rooted for Doxa on more than one occasion. I think they have made the nomination stage, but they've never won. Love Doxas. Doxas, they're orange divers, and they lose every time, but I like them. Um, Tudor figured out the formula. I think you're right, Abdul. Exactly right. Um, Tweaking it every year so you can get one. For example, yeah, that's the whole point. These other people, rather than sort of figure, okay, well, I'm going to see if we can work it the same way and see if we can, get a win an award. They just sort of like, I don't know what they go in, they lose, and they scream bloody murder. Some, I don't think they have a chance of winning. And so what they do, they'll throw a watch in there and put it in, and people talk about them for a long time, and their watch gets to be known. And sometimes people will say, "Gee whiz, that's a shame that such and such a watch didn't win." I liked them, but the fact that they didn't get nominated. That's sort of like my liking of Doxa. Doxas have ETA movements. I don't think they've ever made their own movement, and uh, but there's something about them I like. Um, Okay, let's take a look at some more categories going on. This is the top of if you're following this by the two columns, this is the top of the second column. Jewelry. Okay, they have jewelry, then they have artistic crafts. Jewelry is sort of a bling category. You can have a quartz, you can have any kind of movement just about in the jewelry category, but you got to have a lot of jewelry on there. The very first Grand Prix winner was a jewelry watch by Vacheron Constantin called Lady Kala. That thing was just like poured a bunch of diamonds on it, and it won everything. Then they quit having. How did they have it? You couldn't win two categories, and so in other words, if you win the jewelry category, you couldn't win the uh, what's called the Aiguille d'Or, the grand prize. And so you'd have to lose the jewelry category or whatever other category, then you could win the grand prize. Okay, so they have jewelry. That's one thing. Then they have artistic craft. Now, artistic crafts. The guy who has done very well on that is, beside the men's and complications and everything else, is Kari Voutilanen. Um, he has some stuff. You'll see a lot of really good um, enameling. There's something that's called Cosame. I think that's the way you pronounce it. And you have these little drawings and lines and so forth. And then you fill it with enamel, and then you fire it, and you end up with these incredible kinds of different things uh, for the artistic crafts. Okay. Now the next category, in fact, the next two categories that really sort of fry me in one respect. One is called the petite aiguille, which is for watches that are between 3,500 Swiss francs and 10,000. They used to be the bottom category. I forgot. I think it was anything under 8,000 Swiss franc, but then they changed it and they put another one in. We'll talk about that in a second. One of the things that they've done with the petite aiguille category is they said, okay, it's okay to include smart watches. To me, that is just wrong, wrong, wrong. If they're going to have smart watches or quartz watches, really, they ought to have a category for them. I don't know why they say, well, we'll just put them in here and it's okay. They never win. They haven't won yet. And I think they're afraid there'd be like, how can you, you can do things with a smartwatch that the most complicated mechanical watch would have a hard time doing. And so, to have one, to have a say, oh, okay, so you can do this with this archaic technology, and then here you have high tech, and that's a fair competition. I don't think so. It doesn't make any sense. And the fact of the matter is that in the petite aiguille category, never a smartwatch has never won, but they put them there anyway. I've seen some make it to nominations, and that's I even that I think is wrong, but there it is. Now the thing I like about petite aiguille category is that the watches that enter into it are of this, relatively speaking, you don't have like $100,000 watch versus a $20,000 watch in this category. You have watches that are under 10,000, over 3,500 Swiss francs in the same category. One that has won a lot of these is Harbring 2. They make excellent watches. It's a good place for certain independents like Stefan Kadoki won a couple years ago, and to me it's a neat category. I'll be talking more about this category in the future. Now the challenge category is another one I like. Another one they have the smartwatches in, and I wish they'd take them out. I wish they'd have a separate category. If they want to have, they say, okay, call it the smartwatch category, fine. And then they have smartwatches versus smartwatches. The thing that's important about the challenge category, or the challenge category, is that here is an opportunity for people who don't have a lot of money, who love mechanical watches, to sort of get in the game, so to speak. And they're the watches are under 3,500 Swiss francs. And while that can be a lot of money to some people, to others, it's the only level of watch they can afford. And there have been some good watches in that category, some very interesting ones. One by Gorilla, of all things. They didn't win, I don't think. They were in nomination categories, but they had the Wandering Hours, and this is it was in some interesting watches that they had in there, but they didn't have to compete against some higher horology, so to speak. Okay, let's see some observations. Don't you think that they should split up the sports watch category into chronographs, GMTs, etc., as well as the divers? Well, the thing of it is, Thomas, is that the chronographs have their own category, and so does astronomy. I think that I don't know. My own inclination would be going back to the sports category, and so you could have pilots' watches, motorsports watches, and divers in there. But like, I'm not the one who makes those decisions, but it's I just can imagine. Like I said, this was a hard category to take on to talk about because there's so many variations in it that well, what about this and what about that? And they say, well, we don't want to have too many categories, but they don't want to have the wrong ones either. I think categories like iconic sort of give it, people wonder about it. They say, are they fudging this thing to certain of the older watch companies, or what's going on with that? Uh, the ones I've seen that won are iconic. I mean, it's like, yeah, that looks like, something or other. Like I keep using the Tag Heuer Monaco as one as a typical kind of iconic one, and they enter a lot. I don't know if they've won lately or not. Um, Artistic crafts is actually an interesting category. I agree. I agree. They have some wonderful watches in that category. They had one by Hermes last year that I really liked. Um, yeah, sports. They ought to do something with that. A wrist computer. Yeah, yeah. Owl one. I agree. I'll just call it a wrist computer because that's what it is. I mean, you're untimely. They should low key establish an awards competition generated by the community. Okay, they used to have one. I think it was called the Public Prize. I was looking at one of my old videos, and the video was about, oh, they took away the public prize, and this was they people voted on watches, and I guess the wrong people won. I don't know. I think what they suspected is that certain companies would get together, and some of these, oh, what are they called? Sort of the gang sponsored ones that they have crowd sponsored watches, and they get all the people who invest in it. Says, okay, vote for our watch, and we won our Grand Prix award, even though it was like sort of a so-so watch. But they did do that at one time. Um, the challenge category gives an opportunity to a lot of people to get. I agree. I agree. I agree. Yeah, Abdul. I think the same thing. Hi, Donald. J-Man, iconic Royal Oak Award for excellence in Royal Lookery. Oh, Oakery, Oaky, Royal Royal Oaky. Yeah, I get it now. Uh, yeah, the Royal Oak are the Calatrava. Some of these are very iconic watches. I mean, but Calatrava, it wouldn't be exactly rocket science to put together a Calatrava looking watch and doing what a Calatrava does, time only. Um, Certain models are just hours and minutes. Knock one of those together and say, this is iconic. Um, we should work on establishing a competition ourselves. The Scotch guys on YouTube do a great work with the Oswas. Oh, I didn't know about that. Yeah, I'd like to find out more about that on Timely. I have no idea what that is, but that sounds like a neat thing. We have our own called the Grand Prix picks, and in the Grand Prix pick, we try to pick the winners in the Grand Prix. The ones who make nominations, the ones who could pick the most, who win and period, and then the Grand Prix winner, the one who runs the whole kit and caboodle. So anyway, well, listen, my time is up. Let me mention a couple other things before I got to go. We got the challenge. They have a new category called mechanical clock. Okay, that's a good. I'm glad they did that. Yeah, they're going to put in my quartz clock or something like that. Okay, now they have something called the Innovation Prize, the Audacity Prize, and the Horological Revelation Prize, and then they have the Chronometry Prize. Well, the Chronometry Prize, I'm glad they have the Chronometry Prize, and I'll tell you why. So many good watches are in the men's categories, men's complications category, the tourbillon category, the calendar and astronomy category, the mechanical exception. All of those have great chronometry, but only one can win in each category. And so they have a category, another category called the chronometry. But these categories are not ones you enter into. They're sort of the innovation, audacity, and horological revelation, and the chronometry. Those are all prizes that the judges figure, okay, we've looked at all of these categories here, and here are these two fantastic watches. and we only can give one of them the award, so we'll give them one of these other ones. I think that's what's going on, but I'm not positive. But anyway, I gotta go, guys. Thank you all for coming, and take a look at the GPHG, what's going on right now. And next week, I think they're going to be having the competing watches, and we'll have lots more to talk about. Take care.